Hello, my dears. Today is Holy Wednesday, and today's liturgy follows the same pattern as yesterday's liturgy, Holy Tuesday, with a slightly different point of view. Yesterday we meditated on the account of betrayal written by St. John the Evangelist. Today, the liturgy brings us the account written by St. Matthew. Matthew, who will write based on the testimony of the communities. And he shows us that the Son of Man, therefore the new man, the new Adam, will depart as it is written. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. Sister Matthew in chapter 26, verse 24. Today's liturgy leads us to the threshold of the mystery. We are one step away from the Easter Triduum. Tomorrow, Holy Thursday, the time of Lent ends at sunset, and the Easter Triduum begins with the Mass of the washing of the feet. It is called the Easter Triduum because the Mass that begins tomorrow after sunset with the rite of the washing of the feet and the institution has become scarce. It only begins, it does not end tomorrow. It goes through Friday with the rite of the Passion of the Lord at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and will only end on Saturday night with the celebration of the Easter Vigil. That's why we call it the Easter Triduum, because it's a celebration that begins on Thursday, goes through Friday, and only ends on Saturday. Anyway, in today's Gospel, Wednesday, the eve of the end of Lent, and from the beginning of the Easter Triduum until tension increases, faces close, and hearts are put to the test. The drama of betrayal takes shape, and with it, God's revelation reaches its darkest point, but also its most luminous. And the first point I would like to highlight in today's homily is regarding what the evangelist Matthew will present to us as the price of scandal, 30 pieces of silver. This is the price that Judas Iscariot charges to hand over Jesus. He approaches the chief priests and asks a direct question, completely cold when, "How much will you give me if I hand Jesus over to you?" There is no hesitation in a lament. There is calculation. Judas is calculating. 30 pieces of silver, and that is not a random number. And many times we ask ourselves, why 30 pieces of silver? And here I invite you to go back to the book of Exodus, chapter 21. In verse 32:30, the price paid for the life of a slave who was gored by an ox during the work. In other words, Jesus is exchanged for a price, of a gored slave, as if he were disposable property. He who is a son, the master, the beloved, is sold like any other slave. Matthew, do you want to scandalize us? And he succeeds, my dears, because in the heart of the liturgy, we are reminded that God's love is exposed to the market of our indifference. The second point that I highlight, and that I remember I spoke about yesterday, is the upper room, the place of the supper and the table of tension. The gospel takes us once again to the upper room. It is the Last Supper, but the atmosphere is dense, heavy. Jesus, with all his wisdom, even with anguish, will say, before the 12 gathered there, "Will one of you betray me?" And the disciples, one by one, begin to ask themselves, "Could it be me? Could it be me, Lord?" This is one of the most intense moments of this gospel. Why is it that none of the 12 who are sitting at the table are completely sure? He said. They all feel vulnerable. That is, the 12 realize that sin lives close by, very close by. Just look, they cannot trust themselves. That is why they all ask, "Could it be me?" Because I am not firm in my faith, I am wavering. Because if they were firm in their faith, they would certainly say, "I will not do it. It will not be me who will do it, Lord." But were they weak, vulnerable? That is why all 12 cried out, "Is it me? Will I be the one to do this?" Typical of someone who is weak. And here is one of the most precious spiritual lessons of the gospel. Betrayal does not begin with the act of betraying. It begins with inner carelessness. He who is not vigilant betrays. He who thinks he is firm falls. The liturgy invites us to ask the same question. Is it me, Lord? Not just as a doubt, my dears, but as an examination of conscience, not as a suspicion, but as a plea. Lord, do not lead me into temptation. The third point I would like to highlight is the figure of Judas. What does he exercise? An attitude between freedom and mystery. We then arrive at the dramatic center. Judas, the traitor? When he asks Jesus, "Master, will it be me?" Everyone had asked, but to Jesus, but to Judas? Jesus responds with a double-meaning phrase. He neither says yes nor no. Jesus' response to help Joe? You said it. Jesus does not accuse Judas, but exposes his conscience before himself. It is the silent judgment of the heart. The choice has been made. The plan is underway. What will Judas do? Do in secret. But before God, nothing is hidden, and here we find a mystical point. Jesus allows betrayal. He does not prevent it. He could unmask help at the table. Could he expel him from the upper room? But he does not, because true love, respect, even freedom betrays him. The Christ who loves to the end does not manipulate history. He is until the end. He does not manipulate history. He is redeemed from within, even accepting to be a victim of this human perversion. The fourth point that I highlight is the supper as judgment and mercy. The Last Supper is, at the same time, a moment of profound communion and judgment. The bread is broken, the wine is distributed, and there is the body given up, and the blood shed for you. By voice, who for you who are sitting with me at the table? By voice, the 12 chosen, but also for everyone. But the supper is also a denunciation, my dears. Why that one? Who takes communion without loving? Are they traitors? The Eucharist is not neutral. It consecrates available hearts, but it denounces hard hearts. The Eucharist is not neutral. Therefore, this Wednesday is also an invitation to review our communion with Christ. How are we sitting at the table with him? Are we intimate or are we just close? Do we touch his body with reverence or as a routine? And the fifth point that I highlight is the phrase of Jesus that says, "Woe to him by whom the Son of Man is betrayed." Jesus says this phrase not as a condemnation, but as a future eschatological lament. He does not want the perdition of Judas. He suffers for the perdition of Judas. And here the AI of that one is biblical. Whenever we hear this term, vocative, it comes loaded with a prophetic cry, or a cry in the face of the spiritual ruin of someone or something that could be saved. He preferred the darkness. Today's liturgy is, therefore, a mirror. It reveals to us that the Passion of Christ did not begin with the Roman soldiers. In fact, the soldiers of the Praetorium, the temple guards in the Garden of Gethsemane, but it began with the betrayal of the heart of those who sat at Jesus' table. Before being scourged, Jesus was abandoned. Before bleeding on the cross, he cried in the upper room. In conclusion, my dears, it is important to think about the twilight of love. On Holy Wednesday is the twilight of love, when the sun begins to set and the shadows of betrayal take shape. It is in this twilight that the dawn of Easter already insinuates itself. If you have also betrayed, denied, if you have walked away or sold your faith, your truth, for a petty handful of emotional or ideological coins, know that there is still time. Then I want to be, since that night in the upper room continues to be offered to this day. Mercy is still served at the table, even if the table has friends, bread, wine. And traitor, do not run away from the supper. Do not fear the light. Even though the night has fallen, is the Lord still at the table and looking straight into our eyes? Does he still call us by our name? A kiss in the heart of each one of you.